All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you're watching this video, it's because you are working on theme, plot, setting, and evidence as we review for our CAs. So here you're going to see that I've kind of divided up this TEK, it's a big TEK, into three different sections. We've got key terms, key questions, and when you see a question about. So we're going to kind of go through this together, and as we're going along, I typed this out for you because I don't want you to waste your time just copying things down, but please annotate the passage just like we do in class, just to kind of help increase your understanding. Okay, so on the CA, they're going to ask you about setting. And remember, setting is just the time and place a story is happening. Now, key questions for you. The questions are not going to just be describe the setting. You in 7th grade are going to be responsible for describing how the setting affects the story or affects a character. So when you're doing that, you're going to want to ask yourself, okay, how is the setting described? Is it positive or negative? Are positive or negative words used to describe the place the story takes place? Obviously, if it's described positively, it's going to have positive implications for the character or the story. And if it's described negatively, just the opposite. It's going to have negative implications for the characters or the story. An easy way for me to think about it is like, okay, how might this story be different if it took place in a different or opposite setting? So if I've got a story taking place in dark, scary woods, how would the story be different if it was taking place on a sunny beach? Would it be less scary? Would there be a different lesson? Those types of things. Now, when you see a question about setting, the main thing that you're going to have to do is you're going to need to, of course, go back in the text and notice how the surroundings and the environments are described. Because you may not actually notice at first how the setting is described, but when you go back and look at how it's described, it may provide you with some really valuable answers. Now, the next one we've got is motivation. When we talk about a character's motivation, remember, we're talking about why a character decides to do something. Now, key questions that you can ask yourself to help you understand a character's motivation is, how is the character described? What kind of person does he or she sound like? What thoughts does the character have? What actions does the character take? Now, the reason why these questions are important is because when you're trying to step inside a character's brain and understand why they did something, you first need to understand the type of person they are. So once you understand, like, oh, they're a kind person, oh, they're a helpful person, then you're going to be able to step into their brain and figure out, okay, why would they do that? They did that because blank. Now, when you see a question about why a character decides to do something or about motivation, you need to, when you see a question about the most likely reason a character did something, you need to step inside, like I just said, the character's brain and ask yourself, based on what the character does in the story, what would he or she most likely do in this situation? So you have to use evidence from the story to help you understand what type of character the character is and what they would most likely do in that scenario. Now, the next key term is going to be image or imagery. Now, when we talk about images or imagery, this shouldn't be a news flash to you, but when an author describes a moment in order to paint a picture in the reader's minds, or to help us see what a moment or character looks like or feels like. So this can be at any time an author uses language that helps you understand, that helps you see or feel what's happening in the story. So key questions to ask yourself when you're looking for images and imagery and it's their purpose, you need to ask yourself, what is the author trying to show us or show you by describing something a certain way? How is the author trying to make you feel by describing something a certain way? Now remember, when we're talking about how an author is trying to make you feel, we have a key word for that, and that's mood. And the big way that an author can affect the reader's mood or the mood of the story is by using images and imagery. We kind of did one of these in class where I told somebody to sit down two very different ways. It's the same idea here. One dark, stormy night, the princess walked out into the woods to hear the screeching of a barn owl and the howling of a wolf. Okay, obviously I may not be successful there, but I'm trying to describe a scary scene. I'm trying to kind of have a scary mood, a creepy mood maybe. Once upon a time, a princess walked out onto the sunny beach in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was a beautiful day with a light breeze and seagulls chirping happily above head. Okay, there I'm describing a very happy mood with kind of by painting a picture of what's happening with really positive languages. So when you see a question about images or imagery, you need to go back into the text and make sure the image/imagery fits in with the plot of the story. This is just making sure that you that the images and imagery that you're identifying and the reason why the author's using those images and imagery fits in with the overarching plot of the story. So if the overarching plot of the story is a very creepy story, then you're going to be looking for creepy images or creepy imagery. If you have a very lighthearted kind of humorous story, you're going to be looking for things that are images and imagery that are described, the author describes in a very humorous way. So make sure that the images and imagery that you're noticing, make sure before you select that answer that it fits in with the plot of the story. Now this will be a quick review for you. We have point of view. Remember, we've got first person, and that's when a character in the story is telling the story or is the narrator. So a character is both telling us the story and in the story. Remember, our example of this is what we've read already. We've got wanting more. Jamila is a character in the story, but she also tells us the story. Second person, we've got you. And remember, this is very unusual. It's very rarely second person. We usually use second person for directions, commercials, or speeches, which makes sense because for directions you would say, you take a left on Elm Street, then you take a right on Crowdis. Commercials, you need to buy this product because it is the best way to clean your teeth. And then speeches would be, you need to vote for me because I will do this, this, and this for you. All those things are second person, but remember, it's very rarely a second person point of view. Then we've got third person limited. Now remember, third person is when a narrator outside of the story is telling us what happens using he, she, it, or they, etc. So limited specifically is going to mean that we have access to only one person's thoughts and feelings. Remember, we did a live example of this in class where I narrated one story, and in the limited version, I could only tell you what one person was thinking and feeling. Now, in the omniscient version, I was more like God. Remember, I told you, omniscient, God. In that version, I was more like God because I had access to more than one person's thoughts and feelings. Remember, in that example, when we did that in class, I was able to jump inside everybody in the classroom's head. I was able to tell you anybody's thoughts and feelings at any time. Now, key questions to ask yourself when you have a question about point of view, the key questions are, is the person telling the story, a narrator, also a character in the story? So is the person telling the story also in the story? Now, if you figure out it's third person and you need to decide between omniscient versus limited, what you need to do is look for moments where the narrator describes thoughts and feelings. And then you need to notice, does the person telling the story have access to more than one character's thoughts and feelings? If yes, if it's more than one, then you guys know that it's going to be omniscient. So if at any point throughout the entire story the narrator describes how more than one person is feeling or what they're thinking, boom, omniscient. Now, when you see a question about point of view, you need to go back into the text and find the moments where the narrator describes what someone is thinking or how they are feeling. Now, there are going to be some questions on the CA and on your review today where they ask you, okay, which of the following statements best shows you what the point of view the story is told in? Now, you guys know for point of view, well, those keywords that you need to look for are think, feel, any words that the narrator uses that tells us that he or she, the person telling the story, has access to someone's thoughts and feelings. All right, let's do one of these together. What effect, my number one, what effect does the setting of Upmeads have on King Peter's treatment of his sons? Okay, so I'm looking for effect of the setting, which is Upmeads, and how it affects King Peter's treatment of his sons. Okay, I've got A, the danger of the woods surrounding Upmeads inspires the king to train his sons in battle. The smallness of Upmeads causes the king to sympathize with his son's desire for exploration. The mystery of the woods surrounding Upmeads causes the king to try to prevent his son from leaving the kingdom. The existence of the well, okay, at the world's end somewhere near Upmeads causes the king to keep his sons at home. Okay, and I've got smallness of Upmeads. We've got sympathize with his sons for their desire to, okay. Danger of the woods, to train his sons in battle. Okay, so when I'm doing this, remember, when I look back at my notes for setting, when I see a question about setting, I need to go back into the text and notice how the setting and the environment are described. Okay, lucky for you, I've already read this article, this story, and I've gisted it just like you have. And you see right here, I must leave Upmeads immediately. Okay, there's where the setting starts. It was free to roam his father's land. It was called Upmeads as he's pleased. Let's see, where is more? Okay, Upmeads was virtually surrounded on every side by dense woods and brush. No one except messengers ever ventured through the overgrowth. And then let's see, one day the king finally had enough of the sons begging. Well, off with you then. Have yourself a magnificent adventure, but watch out for each other and remain aware of all times. I hear the woods beyond my kingdom are treacherous, so that's dangerous, and something terrible. I never forgive myself if something terrible happened to my sons. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of negative language here for the setting. Dense woods, treacherous, something terrible might happen. All of those are really negative words. So when I'm looking at this, and I also understand, since I've already read and gisted the story, the danger of the woods, okay, that sounds good, surrounding Upmeads, inspires the king to train his sons in battle. Okay, he never trains his sons in battle. That just doesn't happen, so I know it's not A. Just so this doesn't get confusing, I'm going to switch colors to blue for a second. Okay, the smallness of Upmeads, no, it never says that Upmeads is small. I did not see that. I mean, causes the king to sympathize with his son's desire for exploration. Okay, he doesn't really sympathize. He seems kind of regretful to let them go in the first place. So I don't think he sympathizes with them. The mystery of the woods, okay, that kind of makes sense to me because they don't really know what's beyond Upmeads, causes the king to try to prevent his sons from leaving his kingdom. Okay, that makes sense to me. Because he does try to keep them at home, but doesn't succeed. So I'm going to keep that one there. Indeed, the existence of the well at the world's end, somewhere near Upmeads, causes the king to keep his sons at home. Okay, the king never mentions the well. Ralph, later in the passage, mentions the well. So the best answer here is going to be C. And that makes sense to me because since the setting was described negatively, it would be the mystery of the woods. That makes sense. That's kind of a negative word. And that would make sense if the setting is described negatively, dense, treacherous, dangerous. That would make sense that the king tries to prevent his sons from leaving the kingdom. So here, the setting influences the king to want to keep his sons at home. All right, you are going to use those notes and use these strategies to answer questions 2, 3, 4, and 5. You need to be flipping back and forth in the passage and using the strategies and key questions that we provided. Now, remember, when you finish, you are going to write the number of questions you got correct here, and then reflect on your learning after plugging it into Google Forms. So you guys can go ahead and begin working on that. You're going to have about 10 to 15 minutes to answer questions 2, 3, 4, and 5, to plug them into Google Docs, and then to reflect on your learning. See if you can get mastery. Best of luck to you. Not that you need it. You guys are amazing. Get to work.